Doug, what do we got going on today?
I'm glad you asked that question because it's a special presentation of The Mighty Peculiar, featuring a conversation between you and Christian Picciolini, or Piccolini. We'll let him decide. But in the meantime, give us a click. Click like, subscribe, turn on the notifications.
We're going to talk turkey about extremism. But man, it's so good to meet you. You know, I've been reading all your bios and things like that. And welcome to the show. The fact that you would do this is really an honor. You know, our Mighty Peculiar show is about, conspiracy theories, myths. It's about some crazy stuff, Christian. But when I read about what you went through, and it's pretty incredible, and what you do for people now in your service. I was just talking, to Doug before we came on here, that looking at your past and now that you're a firefighter, it's like service is in your blood now. It's like you made it part of your DNA to help others. And I just think that's fantastic, man.
I appreciate it, Denver. And it's a real pleasure to be here too. Thanks for having me. And the whole conspiracy theory thing kind of crosses over pretty well with my past. So I'm sure we're going to talk about that too.
Well, and the first question I'm going to ask you is a little odd, and you're like, God, but I'm sure, I don't know if people have asked you this before, but because, I've done a lot of interviews myself, and sometimes you get that question out of the blue, but I'm actually asking it for a reason. What year did you graduate high school?
I graduated in 1991.
91. So I was 88. So we would have been in high school together.
Yeah.
So have you turned 50 yet? Are you already over the 50 threshold now, Christian?
Funny that you asked. Just this week was my 50th birthday. So yeah.
Happy birthday, man.
Thanks, man.
Happy birthday. Well, welcome to the end of your life after 50. I just want to tell you that. And, if you wake up tomorrow morning, your knee is all of a sudden swollen. Trust me, it's because you're 50 now. It's crazy growing up in the 80s, right? So you're born in 73.
Yep.
And which is pretty interesting to me. That's actually when my mom was a single mom. So I grew up, in a really weird way. When I was 3, 4, 5, there was no dad around or father figure. But I wonder in 91, when you graduate, do you think, based on your life, what you're seeing now, do you think high school or growing up in that time period or anything like that had something to do with, what you got involved with? I would say incidentally, or the people that you hung out with in high school? Because I know that sort of shaped my life in some ways at the beginning. Do you think that, graduating in 91 during that time period had anything to do with what happened to you, next?
Yeah, and I think it's really specific that it happened to me at that time, because in 1985, in my neighborhood, the American white power skinhead scene was born, like in my neighborhood. Blue Island, Illinois, where I grew up and where I went to high school, was the birthplace of the American neo-Nazi skinhead. So yeah, I would say very specifically in 1987, when I was recruited at 14 years old into America's first white power skinhead group. Yeah, I mean, I don't know that had I grown up anywhere else during that time, it would have happened. It certainly could have, but very specifically in the alley behind where I hung out was where the skinhead group was born. So I had, at a very early age, at 14 years old, just at the beginning of high school for me, right around the same time you graduated, was when this kind of birth of this movement happened. And I just happened to be there, as it happened.
I guess we should go back a little bit. So you graduated in 91.
Yep.
What was the name of the movement that you were involved in and that you were able to actually separate yourself from, or the group that you were with?
Yeah, so in 1987, when I was 14 years old, I was recruited into a group called the Chicago Area Skinheads, or CASH, which was its acronym, and it was the first white power skinhead group in America. I was 14 when that happened. I stayed involved in that for 8 years until I was roughly 22, 23 years old. And during that time, when I graduated high school, I had been kicked out of, like 3 or 4 high schools by that time, some of them twice, and was lucky enough to graduate. But that's kind of my story. I've spent the last, since the year 1999, after a couple of years of being out of that movement, I've got myself out in 96. By 99, after doing some self-reflection and some work on myself, I decided I was going to start speaking up about what I had done and repairing some of the damage that I had caused. So roughly 99, I started to do the work that I'm still doing now, almost 24 years later, of fixing what I broke and trying to fix the relationships and the harm that I had caused to a whole lot of people at that point. And that led me to what I'm doing now, which is trying to help people disengage from those movements, but also helping kind of raise the flag on this threat that we're seeing even today, a quarter of a century later, that seems to have reared its ugly head again, but also gotten, I think, much, much stronger than it was even in the 80s and 90s.
I'm with you. And, I saw some of the indicators before January 6th, and, I got to see a lot of that data, Christian, as it was going forward. But, I'm so fascinated. First of all, you were, between the ages of 14 and 23. Yeah. The fact that you were able to separate yourself at the age of 23 from a place where really was the birth of the movement, to separate yourself from cash, is a testament, I think, to your intelligence. I'm not trying to overly flatter you, because I have a little bit of an idea of what it is to be sort of indoctrinated. So, at 14 years old, you're pretty susceptible anyway. And I think that probably accounts for some of the susceptibility. But what was recruitment like? I've read a lot. I just think people would be like, God, Christian got out at 23, pretty young, but he came in so young. What did recruitment feel like? And what did it, was it the sense of belonging, or was there a specific way that they went about that recruitment as far as actually picking you up or picking you out?
Yeah, I was 14 years old. You can imagine I was looking for a sense of identity. I was looking for a community, and I was searching for a purpose. It's that kind of age that's really important, that, young kids are starting to really develop a sense of who they are and what they're supposed to do with their lives. So prior to that, I was raised in a middle-class family from the south side of Chicago. Both my parents are still married. They had a good relationship. The problem is they're Italian immigrants, so they had to work extremely hard when I was growing up. So I never saw my parents. They were always out working, and 6 or 7 days a week, 14 hours a day. When you have you're left to your own devices and you wonder why your parents aren't there. I blamed myself. I thought I was doing something wrong and that they didn't want to spend time with me. I didn't know better at 14 years old. So I went searching for a family, and I found it standing on in a back alley on the south side of Chicago. A guy walked up to me, pulled the joint out of my mouth at 14 years old, and told me that's what the communists and the Jews wanted me to do to keep me docile. I didn't know what a communist was. I didn't know if I'd met any Jewish people at that point in my life. And I didn't even know what the word docile meant, if I'm being completely honest. But it was him who promised me this kind of camaraderie and delivered on it for a long time. For a couple of years at least, I was rewarded with a sense of belonging. I was rewarded with a sense of purpose. It was a broken and rotten purpose, but at least it was something that fulfilled me at that time, and it was super toxic. So yeah, I think not unlike other 14-year-olds who get pulled into gangs or into drug culture or something like that, it delivered a little bit of what I was looking for, but it was really toxic. And that's when I realized that's when I started to find my way out of that movement. But I had also been kind of afflicted by what I call potholes on my journey. Those potholes, feeling abandoned by my parents, having low self-esteem, those kind of diverted me to the fringes, and they detoured me to these people who were pitching this really toxic sense of identity, community, and purpose. So I think, a lot of people are susceptible. I happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time, so to speak. And that was what I found. That was what, for a very short period, fulfilled me until I realized it was wrong, of course.
No, how much older was your recruiter, would you say, Chris? Do you remember his name, or do you remember?
Yeah, I do remember his name. His name was Clark Martell. He's kind of a legendary figure within that movement. He was, I believe, 28 years old at the time. I was 14. So, to some degree, he was a predator. He was looking for people like me to pull me in. He knew I was broken, and they offered kind of, protection from that brokenness. And that happens a lot, especially nowadays online. You have a lot of folks, who spend a lot of time online who maybe don't have friends in real life, or, are dealing with some of these potholes that I'm talking about, traumas in life. And, recruiters are plenty, and they find these kids pretty easily in places like online video gaming, multiplayer video gaming environments or, chat rooms and things like that.
Because in 91, just like my age, brother, 88, I'm 18, right?
Yep.
You're 15 and 88.
Yep.
I went to Stonewall Jackson High School. I was a Stonewall Jackson Raider, man. They flew Confederate flags, you know what I'm saying? Grew up really religious. When I talk about what happened to you with Clark Martell, and you're talking about the digital environment now and the ability to metastasize that, what's amazing when you're looking at when we were younger, we didn't have that digital ability to sort of echo chamber ourselves right into sort of a direct feed right into your frontal lobe, brother, right there. And, when you're looking at it now, you said something really interesting about these potholes. I think do you think that the digital environment now can take advantage more of those potholes you talk about than when we were younger, right? In our heyday as Gen Xers, man, do you think those potholes are more easily amplified or they're more easily identified?
Yeah, we're talking about it in public. We are like in social media talking about our potholes every day. I can't go a few minutes on social media with somebody talking about, what's happening wrong in their life or what they're complaining about. It's really easy to identify it. And I'd say I'll go even further. It's not just for young people, Denver. You saw this on January 6th. It wasn't a bunch of 14-year-olds there who were storming the Capitol building. It was people in their 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, and beyond. And these are people who have built a whole lifetime of potholes while searching for a sense of identity, community, and purpose. People with health issues, people who, are divorced or having employment issues. These are people who struggle with potholes on a daily basis, who were promised a sense of identity, community, and purpose. There were flags flying that promised that. There were people there that looked the same, that dressed the same. It was the same type of environment that, 14-year-old Christian Picciolini, was in 1987. Some of the same rhetoric was being, thrown around. So, it's this, we have to be careful that this isn't just for young people falling victim to this. We have a whole, population of Americans who, potentially could fall victim to this stuff and do.
Well, you've done this a lot, man. Because that's exactly what I was going to do. I was going to hook the potholes of, the younger generation to the potholes that people were utilizing now at any age, and filling in those potholes with digital electrons, right? They're filling them in with electrons, and belief systems that you're right, man. They're flying the flag of weird things based on what they're seeing online or based on self-selecting into some kind of echo chamber. And, I can tell you in data, right. And I've done this a while, as far as tracking, bad guys sometimes. And Christian, I want your opinion on this because, man, you know it, like you lived it. Do you think now, after everything we've seen before January 6th, and I read a lot of what you were talking about then, and, I was on the floor, screaming about January 6th and October 2020, even before that, all the way back to July. My farewell speech on December 10th, Christian, I was like, things are looking bad. I have this distinct feeling, and it's not just a feeling, it's not just anecdotal, but I think it's also data. I feel like it's worse now than the month before January 6th or the 2 months before January 6th. There's something in the air, and I know you track these things. I know you have a feeling for it probably better than anybody else on the planet. What's your thought about now, based on the hate that you're seeing through anti-Semitism, but also, the hate on the dehumanization on every side seems to have ratcheted up to a level it's really hard to get my arms around, even when you're looking at some of the, the social channels, especially some of the encrypted chat channels and things like that. Do you have a sense where we are danger-wise going into 2024 into the presidential election cycle?
Yeah, I think extremism flourishes most when there is uncertainty, right? And there is more uncertainty, I think, today than there ever was, whether we're talking about, 25 years ago or, on January 5th, and going into January 6th. I think that uncertainty is the one ingredient, and we're experiencing that. We've got wars, in Europe. We've got wars in the Middle East that are happening. There are a lot of people being affected by that, and there's a lot of either rhetoric or a lack of really standing behind what our values are in certain cases that are kind of fostering more of that uncertainty. There are a lot of people out of work. There are a lot of people who can't afford housing or can't buy a house. The middle class has disappeared. there's a lot of uncertainty right now in the world, not just in the United States, but in the world. And I really do believe we're in a more dangerous place today than we were, on January 6th. And when our leaders, can't really stand by what they say, or when they're spouting rhetoric that sounds a lot like, 14 and 15-year-old me, that's pretty dangerous. I mean, that type of rhetoric is really influential to certain people. And, you used to have to look, in alleys for people that were like me, for white supremacists. And now you really don't have to go very far to find those people.
You don't, Christian. When I was campaigning, League of the South is really prevalent down in Southern Virginia. So I had people come up to me, and I know you're familiar with what happened in August 2017 in Charlottesville. I had individuals come to me that Heather Heyer had actually died of a heart attack. It was a bunch of white nationalists that were actually sort of accosting me in the Halifax and Pennsylvania County areas of Virginia. And your terminology on potholes, I've just locked onto. I'm sorry, man. You're talking about, it looks like potholes are expanding with uncertainty, or it's even also, it's not even maybe real potholes. It's what they think they're potholes, right? It's people that are sort of lost, or they have some kind of expectation that nobody can fill. And when I think about you at 14, I mean, brother, how did you go through, like, you went through high school as a member of CASH.
Yeah.
And you have people now in their 40s and 50s that can't get out of this sort of mindset. You actually went through your most formative years as a member of CASH and actually got out at 23. Were there times when, even before, you started to separate out of CASH, were there times where you understood what you were doing, or were you always, up until a certain point, were you always 100% committed to the cause, man? Like, were you like, this is what I'm going to do? And the reason I'm asking this question is what happened on January 6th, what we're seeing now was sort of the rebirth of this kind of hate. Is it just something that you were so latched onto and so sure that you were part of it? Or was it just the brotherhood? Was it just the fact that you were accepted? Was it a combination of both? What do you think was that strain that allowed you to actually sort of live that, that belief system, even through high school? I'm still stunned that you got out at 23, man. I got to tell you, it's just what a testament to that, the fact that you were to do that. But what was it like going through high school? And did you ever even have a time, even when you were 17 or 18 or 19, where you're like, holy crap, man, maybe this isn't cool? Or did you even have any question at all at that point? Going through your formative years, in high school and then right after?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that there was a day that went by that I didn't have doubts about what I believed in, because it was based on an ideology that it's made up of lies. So I don't think that there was ever a day that I didn't have a doubt. At 14, 15, 16 even, I didn't know anything about what I was involved in. I faked it because I wanted to belong. I didn't understand world politics at the time. I started to mimic, kind of the propaganda that was being, shoved at me. But there was a point where I started to believe it. Still always had doubts, but, the belief part kind of overtook the doubt part. And I think at that point, maybe 16, 17, 18, 19, 20 is when, I was afraid of losing what I'd built, because it was the only kind of sense of community that I had at that point. The rest of the world started to write me off. I was a bad guy, right? So they didn't want me back. So all I had was that movement. So the thought of leaving that movement, even though I had doubts, was scary, because it was really all I had at that time. And so I went deeper into it to try and maintain that sense of connection. I'd also at that time become a leader, so there was a sense of agency, at least within the movement. I started a band within that movement, one of the first American white power bands. So I was traveling at 17 years old all over the world, playing music. So to a 17-year-old standing on a stage in front of 3,000 or 4,000 people, that's pretty intoxicating. But I still had doubts. It wasn't a safe place to voice those doubts, but internally I did struggle with that. And then in 1991, my wife, I had gotten married at 19 years old. In 1991, we had our first son, and then suddenly I had a new sense of identity, community, and purpose. I was a dad, instead of a hate monger. I was, a father instead of a skinhead leader, and my purpose, shifted to taking care of my family, my children. I never wanted to, and even though my wife at the time knew, and she was not a believer, she knew, and somehow I convinced her to fall in love with me and to marry me and have children with me. But she hated what I was a part of. But I also knew when I was at home, I didn't want to bring the stuff that I was involved in home. So, my purpose became my family. And then I really struggled, because then I had to weigh, what's more important to me, this new family that I'm building or this movement that I'm building. And, eventually being a dad and being a husband won out, because I loved them more than I loved this feeling of being involved. And that's when the doubts I wasn't able to publicly say them, because it still was an unsafe environment to do that. But I used excuses to pull myself away, and was able to successfully do that, at 22 going on 23 years old. Unfortunately, I had damaged my family at that point, and, my wife didn't want to stay married to me. So I had to be a father outside of the marriage. And that's still, being a dad, every week, whether it was just every weekend or not, was enough to keep me away from that movement, because I knew I wanted to be a good father to my children. I never wanted to expose them to what I'd been a part of.
I got married at 19 too, Christian. And, it's amazing, man. So you have a 31-year-old child.
He just turned 31 yesterday, as a matter of fact. Yeah.
Look at that, man. Yeah, because my daughters, I have a 31-year-old daughter. Yeah. But we didn't, have kids till 22. But I got married at 19, man, because I was pretty much living in a car. I got kicked out of the Mormon Missionary Training Center because I guess just to be blunt, I guess I fornicated too much for Mormons. But it's pretty what do you do? But the fact is, you got married at 19. Do you think, obviously kids changed my life. I went in the military because I was, pretty screwed up, but nothing like that. I don't even want to compare, but I did definitely have an upbringing that was incredibly religious. And I was going to ask you about that. Catholic, is that correct?
I was raised Catholic. Yeah, my parents are Italian, so I was raised, Catholic, and went to Catholic school, Catholic grammar school, Catholic high schools, some public high schools. Like I said, went to 4 different high schools. But yeah, I mean, I would consider myself today more of an agnostic. I really. Me
too.
Yeah, I don't know. The answer is I don't know. So I'm not. I don't believe in something to know that it's the truth. So.
Was there a big religious undertone to Cash when you were part of that?
No, not really. Within the white power movement, within the neo-Nazi movement, there were segments that were very, kind of fundamentalist Christian, or what they call Christian identity. There were, people who were atheists. There were people who were Odinists, which, they kind of believe in Norse mythology as kind of their god system. So there were all different sorts, but being a skinhead was pretty agnostic. There, you could do kind of whatever you wanted, but was pretty agnostic. I think I got burned out after going to Catholic school and Catholic high school. I got tired of the subservience of the religion. It wasn't for me.
I wonder, because I went to Mormon seminary every morning, and I wonder, again, looking at your life, and there's definitely some parallels, but that would be you interviewing me. I want to know about you, and but there's definitely some parallels, and the fact that I'm agnostic now, you're agnostic, I just don't know. The fact that I was raised so religious and was exposed to things that now, just seems so ludicrous, but I believed it in faith, over facts, this fantasy. It's this idea that fantasy is more important than facts, that faith is more important than data. Yeah. And after what you've been through, and what I saw in your life was amazing. By the way, you said you were in a white power band. When Doug sent me that you actually, I think you opened for Joan Jett. Is that correct?
Much later.
No, much later. I should have probably did the same way. It wasn't that white power band that opened for Joan Jett, but it was what was called Random 55.
Yeah.
Is that it? Yeah. Why did you? I listen. When I see band names, because I'm ridiculous. I'm like, why did they name it Random 55? What was there a name? Is there a thing behind that, Christian? Or dude, it's so good.
It's a really stupid story. We went for like a couple of days trying to come up with a band name, and everybody came up with names that nobody else liked. So we're like, let's just pick a random name and add a number to it. So somebody said, hey, how about Random 55? And we all kind of agreed to it. There's really not a whole lot of meaning behind it.
Oh, I love it. I thought it was like the 55.
Don't look into it too much.
Or something.
Yeah.
Oh my God. So are you still doing music now?
No, I'm not. Yeah, I just, as I got older, it's something I really enjoy. My son is a musician. He's an amazing musician. But yeah, just, at some point, after a while, years ago, after I left the movement, I ran a record label and started managing bands. So it was something that I've done most of my life. But yeah, performing, I think, I'll leave that to people to do.
I've always wanted to be in a band, man. So I got a guitar for Christmas. My wife got me some crazy stuff, man. And I'm like, I'm going to learn this guitar, and I've taken 3 whole lessons in 7 months, man. I'm ready. I'm on fire. But Doug's a musician. Doug's a musician. What did you play? Were you a singer? I mean, were you a singer, man?
So
I gotta ask, because
in the white power bands, I was the singer. But later on, after I had a punk band, I was just a rhythm guitar player.
I knew you were the singer. I knew it, man. You got the voice. I can tell you got the voice. But so 23, and was there a specific act? If you look back, was there a day, a violent act, or somebody said something, or I know you had your kid, get married, I get it, right? Changes your life. But was there a thing, Christian, that you can look back on and say, my goodness, I know the day? That's probably a very unfair question, because I'm old too, man. I don't remember shit. I'm not saying you're old. But is there that we're getting there, but is there that day or an activity or a thing that really strikes you as something where you're like, maybe started your deprogramming?
Yeah, I think it was a lot of things, right? It was like a snowball effect. I think every person that I met, even though I had a certain way of acting with them, I think even behind the scenes, though, every person that I met affected me in one way or another. There was always guilt, away from the group, away from people, because it wasn't a safe environment to show that kind of empathy. But there were always moments, like after a street fight, where I felt bad. There was one specific moment, I think, and I can't remember what year it was, but probably 94 or 95, just before I left, where we had gotten in a street fight with some black kids at a McDonald's restaurant. And there was one kid we beat up pretty bad. And as I was like kicking this guy as he was on the ground, I started to think about, this is somebody's kid. This is somebody's brother. This is, there are people that love him at home. And here I am, beating the crap out of him. That was one moment where I actually physically stopped doing what I was doing, because I couldn't physically participate anymore. But there were a lot of moments, people I met that suddenly, had empathy towards me when I didn't really deserve it. But I'd say after I left the movement was probably one of the more impactful moments that I had. In 1999, I came in contact with somebody who I'd known in high school. He was the black security guard at the high school that I was at. When I was there, I was, troublemaker. I had staged like sit-ins and, pickets and stuff like that. And I'd gotten kind of in a physical altercation with this black head of security. His name's Mr. Holmes. And in 1999, years after I left the movement, a couple of years after I left the movement, just the strangest incident happened. I started working for IBM, which again is a strange incident. Here I was a guy kicked out of 4 high schools, had no computer background experience, but I got an entry level job just setting up computers. I was a contractor for IBM, and I was stationed back at my old high school, the same one I'd gotten kicked out of twice. Again, fluke. Of all the places IBM, all the millions of customers they have, I stationed back as my first day back to work at my old high school, and I was terrified. I knew as soon as I walked in, somebody's gonna be like, "Get that guy the hell out of here!" Like, we don't want him here.
Right.
But I went to work that day, and the first person I ran into was Mr. Holmes, and this was 1999, so it was almost 4 years after I had left the movement, and I had disengaged from everything. But when I saw him, I felt really compelled to apologize to him. This was the guy whose life I tormented. So I went up to him, and he didn't really recognize me at first, but when I introduced myself, suddenly he remembered, and he kind of jumped back and like he was afraid. And I extended my hand and I said, Mr. Holmes, I'm sorry. And he shook my hand, but he also told me that wasn't enough, that I needed to do more. He was the one who really kind of taught me that I needed to repair the harm that I had caused. He said, saying you're sorry is fine, but that does a lot more for you than it does for the people that you've hurt. He said, you really need to go back and fix what you broke. And he encouraged me and he mentored me and, you know, he forgave me, which was probably the biggest thing, you know, that could have happened to me at that time. And he said, but you need to go back and you need to work on this. You need to do the work, basically. And it was that day in 1999 where I started to do the work. I didn't know what the hell to do at first, but I kept doing it. I kept pushing at it. And, you know, going into the communities that I had hurt and working with them and explaining to them what I had done and apologizing for it, but not only apologizing, but like committing to stand with them and do whatever work was necessary to fix what I'd broken. So, yeah, I mean, I think that was probably the moment where that changed me the most, because again, I had doubts. So getting out, once I found the opportunity to leave, it was pretty easy to leave, even though, you know, it wasn't a safe thing to leave. But I had kind of made up my mind even before I had left. I was just looking for the right opportunity to do so, to keep my family safe. But it wasn't until a couple of years later, when I had done a little bit of work on myself and found the courage to really kind of commit to fixing what I'd broken, that, you know, it changed my life. And I've been doing that work for, you know, 24 years now.
It's hard not to listen to you, Christian, and be absolutely affected by it. Because I'm trying to imagine you at 26, right? I'm probably I'm doing math in public right now, Christian, so hard, man. But I can imagine you at 26, man, going in to shake Mr. Holmes' hand, and just the effect of him jumping back from you. I can't imagine that, to be honest. But the fact that you would jump back.
We had a pretty great conversation about it years later on NPR StoryCorps. It's probably out there if people want to look for it. But it's kind of, I would love to look for it, of us, you know, coming together to talk about those days. And I mean, he's a great guy. He's been a part of my life in one way or another for, you know, the last decade or so. But
so he's still alive.
Oh yeah, he's still alive. He just retired from school a couple of years ago. Oh my gosh, maybe it's been a little bit more than a couple of years now, but yeah, he's an amazing guy who didn't just affect me, probably affected thousands and thousands of young people like me, because, you know, he was this pretty staunch, you know, anti-racist guy who took care of a lot of, you know, people's kids while they were going to high school. So he changed a lot of lives, not just mine.
So Christian, I went and looked at your Twitter feed, and you know, I could tell that it's amazing how much care you have for people who you feel are being bullied. I think the one thing in my life that I despise are bullies. And looking at your Twitter feed, looking at your social media, reading your bio, I feel like that now, when, you know, talking to Mr. Holmes, I feel like you've built, you know, this sort of umbrella protection that you want to help people, you want to lead them out of the darkness, which, if I may, I think that's what you're doing. And the fact that you were able to do it at a young age, I think speaks to your intellect and your courage. But it does seem to me that it does. I mean, listen, there's not a lot of people that can do this. I mean, it goes to show a mental toughness, but also a spirit and the ability to serve. Like I was talking about, the fact is, I'm not trying to come full circle, that when I saw that you were, you know, in a fire station right now, dude, it's this frappin' service DNA that you get if you feel like, for me, it's always like I have to fix something based on sort of my past. And I feel like that I owe. It just is the weirdest thing. But it feels like, you know, the way that you've actually structured and built your life is to stop people from being hurt, and to try to teach those who are hurting, don't hurt them. This is not the hate that you should actually be employed with or employed in. So it's amazing to me, Christian. It's so flattering and humbling that you would come talk to us, because I think people like you are the people that need to be celebrated. And again, I'm not trying to blow smoke up your skirt, man. Prior military to firehouse, I'm not going to do that. But it just speaks to the strength that you have in you. But again, looking at what you're doing, it really is about protecting others now. And I feel like even now, where you're at, you're sort of continuing that, aren't you? I mean, you're protecting people. That's what you're doing, you know? And it's an amazing thing.
Part of why I do what I do from the very beginning for the last, 24 years is I just wanted to be the person that I wished would have popped up for me in that alley instead of Clark Martell. If had a football coach or, a band or skaters or somebody else like come up to me in that alley and said, "Hey kid, like come with us," I would have gone with them. It just never happened. So I really try and be, in many cases, the person that I wished would have shown up for me. And also when I left, in 1996, when I left the movement, there wasn't anybody like me who had left before publicly. So I didn't have kind of a guide out. And I try to be that for people. And, my whole life since then, I've tried to be of service mostly to the people that I've hurt in the past. But when I decided a couple of years ago to kind of wind down my nonprofit organization, I did that for about a day until I realized I couldn't stop helping people. I really wanted to get back in the service. So now I'm doing it a lot more in my community as a firefighter and as an EMT. I'm paid on call. I'm not a full-time, this is my full-time job, but I don't get paid as a full-time firefighter. It's to try and be there for people who can't do for themselves in a lot of ways. So I feel really called to it. And it's something that, I take very seriously. And I'm very proud of the fact that I do it. I'm a 50-year-old guy who went through the fire academy, in my late 40s. It wasn't easy to do, but it was something that I knew that I needed to do because there was a shortage. There were people who needed my help in this community. And that doesn't mean I'm still not doing the work, nationally and internationally that I do to fight extremism. But I also know that my community needs me too, and I'm honored that they gave me the opportunity to do what I do.
So first, I want to tell you, I want to help you in any way with your nonprofit or what you're doing. When Doug said you were coming on the show, and I started, reading about you, and by the way, I want to make sure I put up the NPR link, Doug, if we can find that, or Christian, if we can get that up with you and Mr. Holmes, because now it's something I need to listen to. I feel compelled to do that. I'm here to help, but I want to ask about one individual. Whatever happened to Clark Martell?
Good question. So a while back, I did another podcast series that I led for WBEZ, which is Chicago's NPR affiliate. It was called Motive, season 3, and the whole season not only kind of analyzes my entrance into the movement, how I was recruited by Clark and others, but what happened to Clark. And I don't want to spoil it for people, but the answer is I really don't know what happened, but I suspect he was murdered by another white supremacist in Texas. And that person was never really held accountable for that. But there were moments where and Clark was kind of the Johnny Appleseed, if you will, of this white power skinhead movement. He was the founder of America's first neo-Nazi skinhead group. But there are also moments where he seems to have cracked, where he seems to kind of shine through with doubts and things like that. So I think it was a really interesting study. It was a really great podcast that I was honored to be involved with. And I think it shed a lot of light onto why we're experiencing some of the same things today as far as recruitment and propaganda and just the growth of the extreme right today.
So, okay, now I'm going to ask the questions I always get asked, because I love that I'm able to do this, man. This is great, because I'm on the news, later, this week and tonight. So I love that I get to ask you this. Sure. All right. You have all this experience, prognosticator hat. What do you see as far as 2024 going into the election? When do you see, or what do you see? Are there some things that you've really been bothered by, or that you want to warn people about as we go into? My thing is always spring of 24, because that's when the presidential election really, heats up. And I think that's when you're going to see some issues. But is there something specific or something you want to warn the public about, or something that's really bothering you right now as we go into 2024? I think I know what you're going to say in some of these, but I just love being able to ask somebody who's lived this, who's seen it, who's taught it, who's protected people. What is your issue, or what are some of your main points going into 2024 in the election season that you would want people to know, or something you're personally worried about?
Yeah, and this is not new, but I think something that's not talked about enough is a lot of the groups, a lot of the rhetoric that I used to say at 14 when I was waving swastika flags and giving Hitler salutes has now made it into the mainstream. So you have a lot of groups working on the kind of the local level, whether it's groups in small municipalities who are running, or people who are running for government, small municipalities now, trying to take over local governments, that are on the extreme right. That really scares me. So, that was kind of a concerted effort on our part back in the 90s when we started to recognize that having a shaved head and swastika tattoos wasn't winning us any friends. We decided to grow our hair out. We decided to start to look like other people, start running for office, start going into the military, things like that, blend in essentially, and recruit the average white American. And I think that, a lot of these book bannings and moms groups that are kind of on the extreme right are accomplishing what we set out to do in the 90s. So that scares me because they're kind of wolves in sheep's clothing, for lack of a better term. They're not, waving swastika flags, but they're proclaiming the same types of rotten values that I was as when I was a neo-Nazi. I think that, there's another thing that I'm really worried about is, what we used to do in the 80s and 90s was pretty limited to the United States. There's a lot of crossover internationally now where groups are working together. The internet certainly helped that. And these groups are trading propaganda. A lot of times there are instigators, and I know we're tired of hearing this about Russia and stuff like that, but there are instigators from other foreign actors who are flooding us with propaganda to separate us and incite violence and racism and all sorts of really ugly stuff within our borders. So that worries me too. And I think also the infiltration of law enforcement and the military, which was also something that we tried to do back in the 90s, where we told people, grow your hair out, go into the military, become a cop. That has happened in some cases. I'm not trying to say it's like a widespread problem, but it certainly, it doesn't take very many people in those types of organizations to create some real damage. So, I'm worried about a lot of things, Denver, to be honest with you. I'm worried about the coming.
Me too, man.
I'm worried about, the rhetoric and propaganda. I'm worried about how polarized we are over a lot of what's happening in the world right now. And I'm worried that we are going further and further away from where we need to be. And that's not necessarily the middle. I'm just saying we need to get to a point where violence isn't the answer. And right now that seems to be the case in many ways.
If I could sum up the three things that you said, the first was sort of this camouflage ability to hide really hateful and racist propaganda and rhetoric. I think the second thing you said that was really interesting to me is foreign interference. You're talking about the ability to incite individuals based not only on digital flows or the fact is they are working together, but also financial flows. And I think the third thing, when you talk about law enforcement, I think that's what I saw. When you look at January 6th, look at the charging documents and how many people were prior military and law enforcement, Christian, it's chilling. And especially if you look at Oath Keepers and Proud Boys. So your 3 points are so well taken. They're so dead on. They're so spot on. They're not just confirmed by your amazing experience. They're confirmed by data. And that's why, you answering those questions is so fantastic. And the way that you did it. And it really, again, speaks to the fact that you know what the hell you're talking about, man. Not that I doubted it, but boy, that was a fantastic answer. The things that I've been fighting for so long. And I want to go back to, you got out at 23. Clark Martell did not. He gets murdered. It's almost a testament to decision-making, right? And, trying to get people out of that lifestyle because you are literally trying to save people's lives, and I think when you look back on your discussion with Mr. Holmes, when you look back on your experience and your warnings for 2024, when you look back on Clark Martell, when you look back on how you were recruited, your whole life is about getting involved in some of the worst things, but having the wherewithal to get out and to bring that forward and to teach others and to make that kind of sacrifice. And what you're doing right now and where we're sitting right now, Christian, I just want to tell you, you're a true American, man. My respect for you is massive. I'm always here. You're going to get my cell number to any help that you need. And the fact that, Doug would think this far ahead to make sure that I get to talk to you, this made my year. And Doug, I don't know if Doug wants to get in and ask you a question or two or, but Doug reaching out and allowing us to have this time was really something.
Hi, Christian.
Hey, Doug.
I got to speak to Christian a couple of years ago, and I think I asked you this. I don't remember what you had said, though. I grew up around hardcore kids in the 80s. Were you in an Oi band?
So yeah, I mean, OA is more the general term for a non-political skinhead band. So there are absolutely, and OA is kind of I think a lot of people don't understand skinheads didn't start out as racist. They started out as anti-racist, and racist kind of co-opted that subculture. And we all now know as skinheads as racist. Well, that's actually not the truth. The origins of it are anti-racist. There are so many more anti-racist skinheads than there are, and a racist skinhead isn't even technically a skinhead. But yeah, I mean, OI is more the term for non-political skinhead music. What I was a part of was a hate group and making hate music.
Right. Did you tour with that band?
Yeah. I mean, we played all over the United States. We played in Europe. We were the first American white power band to leave the United States and play in Europe. I was in 2 bands actually. Released 2 records at a young age. But yeah, that's not one of the highlights of my life. For sure.
The 2 of you, because you both I don't want to compare the church to Nazis, but you did have to leave an ideology, right?
Yeah.
Like you did, so I have to ask you both because we're heading into Thanksgiving, right?
Mm-hmm.
And some of us have to sit at a table with weird uncle who might just blurt out beware Joe Biden's transgender pedo laser or something, right? How do we engage with that sort of thing, from the perspective of someone who's been in a mindset that, that not with the rest of us?
Well, I can tell you cannot debate against lies. So maybe don't even try. I would say, call it out for sure, acknowledge it. And, even countering it with facts isn't going to help because they can lie all they want to counter you. And I think more than anything, they try to surround them with as much empathy as possible so they can see that there really is nothing for them to be afraid of.
I'll tell you, Doug, and Christian, I think they're so great at arguing with massive amounts of research into I would say, facts-based evidence. That they can actually weave a story of such ridiculousness. It's very hard to argue with anybody with facts. What is it? Was it? I don't think it was Twain. I think it might have been attributed to him. But I think Christian, Doug, what do you say? Don't argue with stupid people because they'll just drag you down to their level and beat you with experience.
Right.
I think that's part of it. But Christian, for me, I didn't even get invited to Thanksgiving, man. Once I turned away from Trump, the family issues were quite dire because I turned away from somebody who had been blessed by God. So, it's pretty amazing that you said that because you're right. I mean, facts-based arguments with a lot of these individuals, it's sort of like pissing in the wind. It's just going to hit you in the face. It's just the way it is.
Yeah, I mean, there's really nothing you can say to argue with a lie.
No. So I thought you were going to say something really powerful, we'll try to recognize them or try to meet them where they might feel seen, and then divert them, but then that's a waste of a holiday, right? You're gonna be there till Christmas, right?
Yeah, I would say make sure they don't get the pumpkin pie. I don't know.
Right.
Yeah, that's right. The protect. That's right. You're not gonna let them bully you or that pumpkin pie, Christian, because I wouldn't. And I was trying to come up with something clever at the beginning, what would you do at Thanksgiving, right? You don't want the fowl to get in the way of your fowl, or something like that. But I think it comes down to, I have definitely had these issues because I just don't like the drama, Christian, and Doug, I'm like, hell with that. But I definitely had some older relatives when I came out, but when I came out against Trump, they were absolutely wanted to discuss that over turkey. And I shut it down because, damn it, you're not going to get in the way of me eating. Yes, I like cranberry sauce. I know that a lot of people don't, but I do. And I need you to stay away from my damn turkey and my damn cranberry sauce and not talk about this right now. And that's really what I said. That was it. That was how I actually treated it.
So put on the Twilight Zone and just let it roll.
Yeah, definitely don't let them turn Fox News and ruin everybody's dinner.
Right.
Yeah, just throw the Twilight Zone. Let her eat, man.
Just let it go.
There's always a football game on Thanksgiving. Doesn't the Detroit Lions, don't they always play every Thanksgiving? Just turn the game on.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. You can argue about the Detroit Lions. But no, Christian, I think The thing that I'm really going to do, though, I do have homework, is I need to listen to your NPR interview. I need to go watch your documentaries. I believe you have documentary out there now that I can go watch. And when Doug sent me, Doug, fantastic work. And so I need to go watch that. And I also need to make sure you get my phone number and email. And also I need people to understand that you are an American hero, and you're the kind of people that we need to look up to. And I do hope you stay completely involved. And I do hope you call me for any help that you might need, any nonprofit or anything you might be doing, because I would love to do that, because being hooked to good people, I don't think there's anything better. And I just really appreciate you.
And appreciate you too. And thank you for your service. I think that we all need to stand up and really kind of fight for what we believe in, and fight for our neighbors that we believe in, and, stick up for each other. It's been a long journey for me. I am lucky to be able to do what I'm doing now. So I will absolutely continue the fight. Thanks for having me on. If you're talking about the documentary I did for MSNBC, it's called Breaking Hate. You can find it on Peacock. There are also other things out there. I've got a TED Talk that I did that I think is pretty powerful if people want to learn more about me.
Okay.
I'm pretty easy to find, and I make it that way so that the right people and the wrong people can find me whenever they need me.
I tell you, man, in a world in America, I think we need to be a Christian Picciolini, man. And I appreciate you. Thank you so much. And Doug, yeah, I don't know if Doug wanted to end with anything, buddy. I heard.
No, man, I just want to thank you. Thank you so much for coming on, Christian.
My pleasure, Doug. Thanks. In Denver, it's really great to meet you, and we'll continue the conversation for sure.
And here's what I promise you: one day, me and you're going to do a Thanksgiving together, and we're going to watch the Detroit Lions lose.
And I don't know about the Detroit Lions losing, but not this year anyway. But maybe maybe we'll have to have some whiskey together for sure.
Dude, we'll have some whiskey together, man. Thank you, buddy. We'll have some bourbon. And again, I appreciate you, and thanks for all you have done for people, man. You're a true treasure.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you, buddy. We'll see you, brother.
Bye.
That was great. God, that was great. Oh,
yeah, no, that was really fantastic. And hey, everybody, we will put the links to everything that Christian and Denver have just described down in the description. Yeah, we're not done taping yet. And in the meantime, again, give us a click like, subscribe, notify, subscribe to the podcast. And thank you so much for joining us on The Mighty Peculiar.
See ya on the flip side.
Happy Thanksgiving. On, straight, on, straight.
Illinois Nazis. I hate Illinois Nazis.